Like, we could talk about culture and all in, the in part, like what are you buying into? If I'm asking them to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, well, the other part of it is like, so what is this place I'm at? You know, how many total wins our program has had relative to the world of college basketball, you know, since I've been in 10th grade? You know, how many Sweet 16s we've been to in X number of years? You know, the Big East Conference, like talking about that. So I think it's also important, and we don't take for granted, that when you have a lot of different players coming together for the first time, do they truly understand who David West was and what he did?
This is the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing. Now, here's your hosts, Paul Fritschner and Adam Baum, with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.
Welcome into another episode of the Sean Miller Podcast. Paul Fritschner, great to be back on the show with you guys. Adam
thank
Baum,
you.
am I right?
We appreciate you being back.
You were missed, Paul.
Well, it's great to be back with you guys. Feels like home again. As always, this show is presented by Deer Park Roofing, the official payroll sponsor of the Sean Miller Podcast, Payroll Partners, and our friends at TGE Solar. So it is June 2nd as we record this, Coach. You just had your first meeting with this next iteration of Xavier basketball. The next team, you guys just wrapped up your first team meeting of the season. So in a way, here it is June 2nd. First game's not till November. But really, in a way, this is the start of the season. So in June, it's go time. You have 8 weeks over the summer that you can prepare these guys as the rules allow into the next season. So just for the fans that are trying to understand where we are here and how the summer works, what is June 2nd and what does today mean for next year's Xavier team?
Right. So a few years ago, we have a new calendar over the summer in college basketball. And Paul, what it allows everybody to do in college basketball is choose 8 weeks where we have 4 hours a week on the court with our team. All right. So if you break that into, you know, I think some coaches say, hey, these are the 4 days. Next week, we're going to have player development or team practice. We're going to work on our defense. We're going to work on our offense. We're going to, you know, compete and do the various things that you can do with your team. But you have access for 4 hours a week for 8 weeks, and we can earmark the 8 weeks we want to work with our team on. So that's for everybody. The way we do it is we go start here at the beginning of June. Everybody's reported this week. They get tested in terms of the medical part of things, and you know, hopefully everybody's good and cleared, et cetera. Academically, we have a lot of different things that are happening on our team. And again, I think that's more of the norm in college basketball now, right? You have young guys like Trey and Dalen, for example, that are going from their freshman to their sophomore years at Xavier, right? You have certain guys like Marcus Foster, for example, that now is applying to graduate school, and he won't really take much this summer, but in the fall, he'll begin his graduate level work. So imagine the difference there. So academically, everybody's getting both feet on the ground, but we, for the first time, have our team here. And our 8 weeks, the first week of the 8 weeks begins really tomorrow, which is Monday.
It's crazy being here in June and thinking that the start of the marathon, fans show up in November.
I mean, Paul, if you go back to the early 2000s when I was the coach here the first time,
yeah.
You didn't even have access to your team in the summer. So what they would have been allowed to do, only if they were in summer school, is work out with the strength and conditioning coach, and then they could pick up and work in a gym by themselves. A lot of them would try to go to different camps or work with their trainer or go home and come back. So, you know, you really had to be in a holding pattern of coaching them again. You know, you were able to just oversee their development and making sure they were okay, but you had no on-the-court, real tangible way of coaching and teaching them. It's a great rule that allows the player to improve, I think teams to grow closer together and improve. And as a coach, it's really what we're all signing up for, and that's to develop your team and your player. A great way of building a relationship with a player has always been you get on the field or the court with them. And when you're not able to do that for months at a time, it actually hurts your development and your ability to relate and get to know them. So, you know, this summer under this new model, keep in mind, it's much different than it's ever been, and it's, I think, in a good place.
Sean, I want to thank you. You were nice enough to let me and Paul sit in on this first team meeting, and I love stuff like that. I have a tendency to maybe over-romanticize things a little bit. But for me, it's like you think about the course of a college basketball season, you have hundreds of meetings with these guys, but you only have one meeting that's the first meeting. What's it like for you? You've done this for 20-something years now. You've sat in front of a room of guys who are always going to be looking at you when they have questions. And I'm just curious what that moment is like, how you interpret that at this point in your career.
Yeah, so some of it is the same. And again, Adam, I think some of it is different. For example, like this first team meeting comes at the beginning of June, at the beginning of an 8-week period of time that at one point didn't exist. So I just covered that, right? So as the world evolves and changes, all of us are responsible for evolving and changing with it to be at our very best. I always go back to something, and I might have said this on one of our podcasts some time ago, but the best advice that I've ever given, ever was given, and it's advice I've given a lot of younger coaches, my own sons, different people that want to coach, go on and do different things. And I was talking with Jeff Van Gundy, and I asked Jeff, you're small in stature. You didn't play in the NBA. You didn't even play at a very high level of college. I know you loved the game. You were a son of a coach. And yet here you are really at a young age going from almost a graduate assistant to an assistant coach in college to becoming an assistant in the NBA with the New York Knicks. And then you became the head coach of the New York Knicks. Like, you don't look the part. It doesn't look like your pedigree has set you up to be a successful head coach. Now, I'm going overboard and explaining to you guys, maybe I wasn't as in depth with them, but I think you know where I was coming from. Like, how do you do it? Like, how would I, if I would be an assistant in the NBA or want to get into the NBA or even coaching in general, like, how do you do that? You know, to get the respect of guys like Patrick Ewing, Latrell Sprewell, Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason. I mean, that was a rough group in a good way, veteran group. They're trying to win the NBA championship. And he said to me that he asked the identical question to Pat Riley. And Pat Riley said, it's simple. No matter who you are or where you're from or where your background is, eventually players will judge you on the same three things. So let's flip it and say I'm a former NBA All-Star and a great player, and I look the part, and I'm going to have everybody's respect that's in that locker room when I walk in because I have walked in their shoes and I have been there and done it. But inevitably, when you talk about that particular player becoming a coach now, what Pat Riley was saying is he too will be judged on the same three things as you, Jeff. And those three things are, what is your work ethic? Are you a hard worker? And look, everybody thinks they work hard, but there's a difference. Like, are you the first one in the office? Are you early to the court, late to leave? Do you put in overtime? Because a player always notices, and they clearly and quickly will notice the opposite if you don't work hard. Number two is, are you competent in what you say? Like, do you have a total command on the court about this game? Can you teach them? Do you know what you're talking about? Are you prepared? Same point. They will give you the benefit of the doubt, and they will listen. They will listen from a distance. They will ask questions. They'll be a curious learner. But they have to decipher whether you can help them or not. And the only way you can help them is you have to have a total command of what you're talking about. If you don't, they won't pay attention or give you the respect that you're looking for. And number three, and probably the most important, is, do you tell the truth? Sometimes the truth is not going to be an easy conversation between a coach and a player, especially a veteran player. But do you level with them? Do you give them the absolute truth? You can give them the truth 9 times in a row, but on number 10 conversation, if you lie or you lead them down the wrong path and they feel that way, you lose them. And I have never forgotten him giving that to me. And I've passed that on so many times. So I always try to remind myself that in a moment like this, where you have a group of guys at Xavier together for the first time, coming from different places, and this is the first team meeting, it's not how much we say or, you know, the imagery we put on a screen. It's those same three things, you know? I'm a coach that's going to work hard. I'm a coach that's going to be completely competent on what I talk about. I'm going to be a coach that tells the truth. And I think you always have opportunities, whether it's a team meeting, whether it's a quick conversation, or whether it's at halftime of a game, to stay true to those three things. And I think it's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given. And if you guys, you think about it outside of sports, how true those three things are. Like, put yourself in the player's mindset. Do you ever trust someone that has lied to you? And start, or, they really truly don't know what they're talking about when they talk to you about that. It's like, whatever, right? We all know those people. So
you see right through it.
Yeah, and that's how I try to go about it.
Hearing you say that and trying to set a standard for so many transfers that come into the program, I'm curious now that you have so many new faces, like you talk about, with all these different coaches that they've heard this same speech from before, and now you're setting that standard here because a lot of these guys have played college basketball for a long time at a lot of different places for a lot of different coaches. Is that a conversation when you're recruiting them that, a lot of these coaches too, that their background is, hey, we're going to get on the same page. You learn this year and this year and this year. We're going to combine this, and you're not doing all that in the first meeting. So at what point in this meeting are you trying to kind of thread all of those same players, and try to build that culture and that background together?
Right. So, I think it's so much, Paul, about just like, this is who we are. This is the standard here at Xavier. These become our expectations. This is how we go about it. Now, we haven't done a lot yet, but these are going to be the expectations. And, I like to come back to really an ever-evolving, ever-changing, belief in how to go about building a culture in today's world of college basketball. And there's a lot of ways. This is our way. And, we operate with all in, all meaning everybody, every manager and coach, every walk-on, every scholarship player, whether you're a newcomer or you're the most veteran player in our program, like Jerome and Zach are. Like, look, we need everybody committed to what we're doing here. And then, the end becomes, what am I committing to? Yeah. How do I do it? How do we lift weights? How do we practice? What are the expectations and how we communicate with each other? What is our way? When we say do what we do, what does that mean to you? So that's the end. And I think when you put them together, all in, it's really, I think, a way of me saying to our players and coaches and everybody is, we are all trying to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Our individual goals as a coach, our individual goal as a player. Like, you can have very individual goals in what we do in sports. Like, this is what I hope to accomplish, but you have to also be able to do it through the team concept and through an organization and a program that clearly has stature and a way of doing things. It's like, do what we do. Our way works. We need everybody, all of us, to be able to buy into our standard and our way of doing things. So, one conversation and one team meeting doesn't mean you did it. Yeah. But I think there's a starting point to everything, and really trying to cultivate, everybody and coaching staff as well, that we're in this together. We all have responsibility. And man, we're lucky to be a part of such a great program. So you guys are in our team meeting. And I think one of the other things we really tried to do here today in our first team meeting is talk more about the history of Xavier. You saw that. Like, how many Sweet 16s we've been in since 1985. How many total wins our program has had relative to the world of college basketball, since I've been in 10th grade. How many Sweet 16s we've been to in X number of years. The Big East Conference, like, talking about that. So I think it's also important, and we don't take for granted, that when you have a lot of different players coming together for the first time, do they truly understand who David West was and what he did, and how many Elite Eights we were at and in. And, Gonzaga would have been the last Elite Eight. And by the way, that Elite Eight, that means that's the game for the Final Four. How close we've been so many times. So we talked about that, and I think that's setting the tone, too, Paul and Adam for this. Like, we could talk about culture and all in, the in part, like what are you buying into? If I'm asking them to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, well, the other part of it is like, what is this place I'm at?
Yeah.
So not taking it for granted, and I think really starting off with that type of team meeting, as opposed to maybe what I would have done when I was a younger coach. This is how we lift weights. This is what we do. This is where you show up. Like, some of that will take care of itself. We have a great strength coach, Andy Kettler. I have total confidence that he'll make sure that everything's communicated there. What I want to be in charge of is the importance of everybody understanding that, man, we're building a camaraderie and a togetherness in a really good way.
The other thing that stood out to me from this meeting, and we were sitting here talking before we started recording, and you asked us, what we thought of the meeting, what we noticed. And I noticed that one guy showed up to the meeting and he brought a basketball with him. And to be clear, there's no hoop in the room. There's no basketball component, but he showed up and he brought a ball, and that stood out to me. And that was Ryan Conwell. And I don't really have a question there. I just think stuff like that is really interesting, and you learn a lot about someone by something as simple as that.
Yeah. Ryan is one guy that I believe, through what we've learned about him, and clearly I'm so excited to coach him, and, especially this summer, beginning with these 8 weeks. But what I have learned, and what we've all learned through the research and talking to those that have been his teammate, competed against him, coached him in high school, coached him in college, is, he loves the game. He genuinely loves the game. The game means a lot to him. And we have I think a team that we have a lot of different guys that this game means a lot to. Bill Walton has passed away recently, and I don't believe we've had a podcast since he's passed away.
No.
And I want to talk about him, a little bit, but one of the things that he would say to me a lot, and he would show up at every shoot-around that he covered. When he was on the game, he came to your shoot-around, home or away. And at Arizona, he worked for both the Pac-12 network and ESPN. So the combined total amount of games per year that I had him was a lot. So we got to know each other, and certainly got to know and trust each other more over time. 12 years is a long period of time. But he would say this, and he said it to me in my first year, and he said it in year 12 or 11, because year 12, I don't think we had announcers at the game.
No.
He said, Coach, I want to ask you about your big guy. And I'll use Caleb Tarczewski as an example. Caleb started and played for us for 4 years. He was a terrific front court player. You guys probably remember him when we played against Xavier in the Sweet 16. Caleb would have been our starting center. And he would say, does Caleb play basketball because he's tall or because he loves the game? And Coach, let me be more specific with you. If you're 6'1", and we had a shirts and skins game later, pick up basketball, would he participate? What would you say, Now, he said that every shoot around about every big guy for 12 years. I got it. I would cut him off. But it was his way, I think, of saying what he valued the most about the game, being a 7-footer himself or 6'11", is like he loved the game. He saw it for its purity, its passing, its movement. He saw the greatness in other players, whether they were his teammate or somebody he played against. If he wasn't playing the game, he enjoyed watching the game. He enjoyed working on his game. I mean, it was a real passion and love, So back to our team, I think when you recruit, sometimes you could take for granted, these guys, are they just playing the game because it's what they're supposed to do, what they've always done, or maybe it's what somebody told them to do a long, long time ago and they're good at it? Or do they play it because they love it? Because the ones that love it, I think, have a better opportunity to grow more and be better, to improve. They're easier to coach. They simply want to be coached, So my hope, Adam, is that the collection of guys for 2024, 25, this team, year 3 for us, is that we have a group of guys that truly love the game.
The Sean Miller Podcast is proud to partner with Xavier University's Williams College of Business, ranked the #1 online MBA in Ohio once again, and with nationally recognized concentrations in marketing, business analytics, entrepreneurship, and finance. The Xavier MBA advances your career. Classes are offered in part-time, full-time, online, and executive formats. Xavier alums receive a 25% tuition scholarship. Join Greater Cincinnati's largest MBA alumni network. Find out more at xavier.edu/MBA. The Sean Miller Podcast is proud to partner with Deer Park Roofing, a company that's provided elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. Whether your needs are residential or commercial, like the outstanding work on the Cintas Center, the home of Xavier basketball, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is protect what's important, and what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com. The players on your team right now, and I know Zach and Jerome, Zach was just on the show a few weeks ago, but as far as Jerome goes, I don't know how much you can share medically, but some pictures have come out of him being able to shoot and kind of get up and down a little bit. Where is he right now, for as much as you can share, just how healthy Jerome is?
So Jerome's about 4 months out post-surgery on a torn Achilles. He's doing very well. He's had no setbacks, and he's had incremental increases in terms of everything that you want him to have. A, surgery was successful. B, no, post-infection or anything. C, he starts off the rehab, does what he's supposed to, and starts each week to make gains. So I think he's exactly where he should be. I think what we're hoping is 4 months, when he's at about 7 months, he'll be able to be out there non-contact, doing a lot of things on the court. And then as we get more into the middle of the fall, call it mid-football season, that he would eventually be cleared for contact. And then we incrementally will work him from cleared for contact into doing it more often. And my hope is that it trends towards him being healthy for the start of the season in early November. And, where he has a real track of being able to shoot, work on his game. He's lifting weights right now. He's doing rehab. He's able to do some spot shooting. So, he's doing remarkably well considering all that he's been through. And I want to say this, I have not in my time come across an individual player who's gone through more than he has, obstacles to overcome. And, he's an inspiration to all of us.
It's crazy. Yeah, because Xavier fans might not realize this, but before he got here, he had issues at Indiana with some serious stuff. But I'm curious, this is probably not something that you do, but I think it's a common thing for fans, or maybe even me and Paul, where, today you have your team together for the first time. Is it hard or impossible for you not to think about what they could be, Or do you just say, what, so many things have to happen before we get to that point? It's stupid.
I think it's the second, Adam, because one of the things that you learn, I think, as a coach is you're on a quest to know your players better and to work with them and to teach them. And the more we're together, to my earlier point, the stronger your relationship, the more familiarity. I think the more as a coach you truly know what their strengths and weaknesses are and how we can take advantage of the strengths and improve their weaknesses and work together, right? I always point towards the middle of December. I think that's when you really know everything, good and bad. Yeah. And look, what's bad? Bad, maybe he's not a starter, he's a guy off the bench, or just, he's having a harder time picking a certain aspect of the game up, more so than I realized at the beginning. But you get into the middle of December when they've had an entire summer, an entire fall, the entire 30 practices we have with them in October. You get through the lion's share of your non-conference, headed towards the Christmas break and conference play. I think you got a great grasp at that point. So for me and for us, it's about the process of doing things correctly, the right way, pushing them, teaching them, learning who they are, building that relationship and the trust every day to that point. And I think then things will fall in line.
So to bounce off that, just since we're talking about it, I don't think we've talked about the non-conference schedule yet on the show, but as far as what we're looking at here going into the season, Wake Forest will be here at home. That was announced a few weeks ago. That's the return of the Skip Prosser Classic. And then there's pretty marquee games that are away from Cintas this year, going down to Fort Myers for that early season tournament, be on the road for the Crosstown Shootout in December. That's on the 14th this year. That was just announced. And then on December 6th, they'll be down at TCU in the final iteration of the Big East, Big 12 battle. But a pretty, I think, good mix of a non-conference schedule to get a good test, to your point that you just made about seeing where you are before Big East play starts.
No, for sure, Paul. And look, I'm going to start with the Big East. It's 21 games. It's not 20. We're a conference that plays everybody twice, 10 at home, 10 on the road. There's 11 teams. 21 games. Why? Because everybody's playing at least one game in Madison Square Garden in the Big East. You get to a 22nd game. So our 22nd game of the Big East season this past year, we played UConn. So you're going to play the overall 1 seed, soon to be national champ, on a neutral court 3 weeks before the national champion that they become, right?
Yeah.
Look, when you play in our conference, that's 21 plus games of real basketball. I mean, every road game is playing against good coach, really good players, good team that has a summer program just like us, in front of a frenzied crowd with a lot at stake. So how you prepare for that, and then, of course, we respect that you have to be able to challenge yourself in the non-conference season. And the games that you went over truly will be able to allow us to be in that category. But I'm never going to be worried about, is our schedule tough enough? I think what I'm more worried about is, how good are we? How much better are we getting? Because once we're in this conference, America's best. Everything, it's up to us to perform and be the best that we can be and grow as the year goes on. And look, I don't think I'm speaking any differently than any other of the 10 Big East coaches. If they would be sitting here and answering the same question, like, we're in a great conference. So we're going to embrace it. We respect it. But a lion's share of our conference is the home and away games and the Big East tournament. And when you talk about our season schedule, that's it right there.
Sean, one of the things that you talked to the guys about downstairs was joy. That one of 5 pillars that you have for your team. But I'm curious, you gave them examples of joy and why you still want to do this at this level. And it's just, I think the obvious question is like, this is what, year 21 or 22 for you now? Something
20,
like that?
I think it's year 20 as a head coach. Who's counting? 32 is total, yeah.
But, like, do you still love it the way you always did?
I really do, and I learned that in the year that I didn't coach. I've certainly learned that over time. One of the other things that I try to do a better job of, and I think my wife helps me a lot with this, I'm not good at it. Maybe I'm getting better, maybe I'm not. It all depends. You'd have to ask her about that. But
and we will.
Is the joy of it all too, because so many times during my time as a coach, both here at Xavier and also at Arizona, I experienced joy for about 5 minutes after a big win, the thrill of victory, and 5 minutes later, I'm on to the next game, the next day of practice, a worry about what a player is thinking, maybe someone who didn't play as much, or what they're going to say in the post-game press conference, or are they going to take the next opponent serious? You know, generally speaking, who has the scout? I mean, I keep going on and on and on, where your mind just races quickly to the next thing. And you're kind of wired to do that when you're a coach, because we're talking about the first team meeting here at the beginning of June. We have a long way to go. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of different items you want to be good at. But to gloss over a great moment, it's not fair. It's not fair to those that are around you, coaches, staff, your team, my family, you know, probably even myself. And so that's something that I try to be better at, make myself more aware of. You know, when you're us a year ago, there isn't a lot of joy. You know, it's just, you know, you're fighting uphill from day one, and You're fighting to have a winning record, to just stay alive. But I go back even to 2 years ago when we were a 3 seed back at Xavier, 15-5 in the Big East regular season, getting to the Big East tournament's championship game and losing to Marquette, being a 3 seed and, getting to the Sweet 16. I mean, those are all things that are difficult to do. Could I have done a better job of taking some time to enjoy those moments? Probably. And I think that's something that, all of us, you try to grow and get better, learn from. That's a constant quest for me. I guess how I'm wired, my dad was my high school coach. Great high school coach. Amazing dad. And he gave me a ton of gifts. And he probably gave me a curse too. But one of the things he was adamant about is like, you never show emotion or expression, in terms of from a negative perspective as a player. You keep yourself in check. Don't ever let your opponent know what you're thinking. When guys are like celebrating, you stay poker faced. Things aren't going well, you stay poker faced. So I lived that. And that, especially back then, that's, if you think about the best of the best in any sport, they seem to have that, right? Now it's much different, and it's kind of okay to celebrate. Think about Steph Curry after making a 3-point shot or after a big victory, and then go back to like maybe how Larry Bird would have been. Big shot or victory, I think it's grown and it's evolved. But my dad, we were in a big game. I can remember like it was yesterday, my senior year, Blackhawk High School versus Beaver Falls, big rivalry. And Beaver Falls had beaten us for many, many years. And in particular, me as a player, I really didn't have a lot of success against them. And we have them at home my senior year, and we beat them. And I remember like dribbling the ball around the court with my finger up, like number one. That was about as much as you could do, like basically, yep, number one, you didn't beat us, I won, and dribbling it around. I mean, maybe for 5 seconds. I looked over at the bench, and you would have thought it was like, I can't believe you did that. Blah, blah, blah. You can't do that. So that's the greatness of my dad. But that's like, I think I go back to that period of time. As you could see, I still remember.
Yeah.
So when that person becomes a coach, how does he go about like a win? I remember watching Jay Wright win his first national championship.
Yeah.
And he gave no expression.
It was smooth.
And I've listened to him explain why. He really felt it inside of him, but his feeling immediately went to how Roy Williams would be feeling as the person that lost on that shot. And he kind of went there like, that was his first almost concern, as a sportsmanship, as a coach, camaraderie, and being on the other side of it before knowing that terrible feeling. So I'm sure he enjoyed it, but if you think about how he reacted, it reminded me of kind of my dad talking to me, as a young player.
That clip of Jay saying bang and then turning around to go shake hands. And you can see that one little like kind of smirk, right? That little grin.
He should have. That was a big shot.
Yeah. I think to go back to something earlier that you were talking about with Bill Walton and how much he meant to the basketball community and just to the cultural community of sports. I mean, he was a larger than life personality. And as you said, somebody that you got to know pretty well over your time at the Pac-12. But outside of what you guys, did on the court and the shoot-arounds and everything, but what he meant to the game and to sports and fans in general and everything, his commentary on games, it's such a shame to know that he's gone and we're not going to be able to have that again. But I know knowing him personally, I've never met him. Adam, I don't want to speak for you.
I sat next to him at the Maui Invitational one year.
How was that?
It was an experience.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Yeah. But for Bill and for you, Sean, what was your relationship like maybe off the court? Did you have a relationship with them that, outside of the game that you were able to kind of look back on now and just think the kind of person that he was?
Mm-hmm. So Bill Walton, when I first became the coach at Arizona, it was also like a transition period of time for him where he was now going to be the face of the Pac-10 and transition. Because remember, he was in the NBA for a long period of time. Yep. And he would do college games, but he was really moving towards being the voice of the Pac-10. And so it coincided with my arrival as a young coach who he never met before, and now I'm the new coach at Arizona. You also have to realize that his son, Luke, played for Lute Olson, and Bill Walton looked at Lute Olson as a version of John Wooden for obvious reasons. Both Hall of Famers, both national champions, an older veteran, and Luke Walton, Bill Walton, obviously loved Lute Olson and respected him a great deal. So here I come in, as the new guy from Cincinnati, Ohio. And at first, I didn't really know how to take him. And he probably looked at me as like, well, who is this guy, right? So again, I just followed my own rules, tried to be myself. But there's a couple things about him. Number one, I would say this, that he's very much misunderstood by a lot of people. Not everybody, but those that know him the least will misunderstand him the most. And that is, you think that who he is on air is an act, and his joy and love for life and how he talks and how he approaches things on the air isn't who he truly is. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. He is that. I've never seen another side of him. And I mean that in a very complimentary way. Like, all of us try to be genuine, true to ourselves. Nobody's been more authentic to himself than Bill Walton. But his love for life, his caring attitude, his curious nature, his love for the game of basketball and like the West Coast, Grateful Dead, like that's who he was. And like you felt that whether it was a coach talking to him in a shoot around, if you met him on the street, if you watched him in a Pac-12 game, if you played with him, I'm sure, with the Boston Celtics, they all will give you a version of what I'm describing, right? And these stories that you hear coming out about him, they verify what I'm saying. But when I was no longer the coach at Arizona and I lost my job, I lived in Tucson for the remainder of my time there. So I was the head coach there for 12 years. I lived in Tucson for a 13th year. We didn't know where we were going. We lived there. My son was a freshman sophomore at Arizona. We had a lot of friends, so we just decided to stay there. But it was a weird dynamic. I'm no longer the coach, just sometimes just looking at that mountain saying, what am I supposed to do today? But I got a call in January, and it was a voice message. I still have it, and it was from Bill Walton. And I was like, Bill Walton. And I had talked to him a couple times after that period of time had ended for me. But he left this voice message. And if you know Bill Walton, he never leaves like a simple voice message. It's always long. And there's always a lot to it. And it'll start with, Sean, Bill Walton. Or Coach, Bill Walton. And so he starts everything off like that. And he went through it, and he simply said this. I'm in Tucson. I'm covering the U of A game. And generally speaking, when I'm covering the Arizona game, I think of you because you were the coach for a long time, and we got to know each other. And now you're no longer the coach, and I just wanted to see if you're doing okay. I was thinking of you, miss you, hope you're doing great. Just remember, you're an awesome guy. You're a really good coach, and I miss you, my friend, Bill Walton. And like he didn't have to do that 100 times over, right? I would have never thought anything differently. And yet, when you really think about who did what during that period of time, that's when you truly get to know people. And he didn't do that once with me. He did that like multiple times. Different versions. The first one was that, but he called again when I became the coach at Xavier. I got another voice message. And it's like at that point, him and we didn't work together anymore. I really couldn't help him in any way, shape, or form. But I think it goes to show the big heart and the thoughtfulness of him and really who he was. I also have one other Bill Walton story, and it goes like this. I was sitting at a Pac-12 dinner, and he happened to be the person seated next to me. It was a dinner that we all had to go to. As a matter of fact, if I remember it correctly, I think we got fined if you left early or didn't show up. I might have got fined one time. So you went to like Pac-12 Media Day and you had this dinner for no reason. But anyway, none of us could get out that night. You had to stay overnight. And You had to just sit there for 3 hours and eat steak or whatever. Bill and I shared in why are we doing this, but anyway, we were there and we were sitting around a lot of different types of people, and one person in particular, he was just grilling Bill Walton, like one question after another after another. And Bill Walton, as we talked about, kind, open-hearted, witty, and he would answer them all. But you could just sense that it was wearing on him because he was stuck. He couldn't get up. He was just in this dinner situation for 2 hours, 3 hours. And the more that he answered the questions, the more entertained I got, because I could just feel it in him that he's just like, you're not going to ask me another question, are you? So then he or she across the table said, hey, Bill, I don't know if I've asked you this, but like Boston, what a great place. I've been a Celtic fan forever. And, I think she was going through I grew up there. I went to games. I went to a game when you and Larry Bird were playing, blah, 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 Boston. She set the tone. What did you love living in Boston or whatever? And he was like eating, and he just kind of stopped, and he said, if the Pilgrims would have landed in San Diego, Boston would be a state park that nobody would know. That's it. He didn't give another word. He just went back down and finished eating, his salmon or whatever he was eating. And it took me actually 10 seconds to kind of transcribe in my mind, like, that's a wild answer.
That's so wild.
So where was he going? And if you really think about it, he was basically saying, like, come on, man. Like, I didn't want to live there. I played for the Celtics. I'm from San Diego. It's like the greatest place in the world, the greatest weather in the world. And I was stuck up there playing for the Celtics. That's how I felt about it. But it was such a classic, clever answer, and I just think he was just one of a kind. I got to know Luke Walton, and Luke was great to me as the coach, in terms of a former player and supporting everything that we did through thick and thin and being there in the good times and not so good times. He was awesome, and in his own right, great player, world champion, NBA coach. So, our thoughts as a family really have been going out to Bill and his family. But you talk about just an amazing, one-of-a-kind person. I feel great. There's a lot of gratitude for me that I had a chance to meet him and know him like that and be around him at that level, because when people are able to talk to me or bring up Bill Walton, I have a lot of context. You're not going to be able to just bring that topic up and me not know who he was. They talk about his teepee in his backyard. Our sports information director at Arizona, a younger guy, Matt Enzer. Matt became really good friends with Bill, actually stayed overnight in Bill's teepee, went to a Grateful Dead concert, I think multiple concerts with Bill. But that's just the type of guy that he was. He was amazing. And the other part that never really resonates with you is when he's talking to your team as an announcer and he walks out there and they know he's funny and all that, but none of them really truly understood, like, you do know he's one of the greatest players to ever play this game. The older generation will tell you, might be the greatest college player to ever play. You can go through championships, statistics to back that up. And a lot of people in the West Coast will say, like, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Bill Walton, like at UCLA, who is more revered. I mean, it's really a debate which says everything you need to know. So I would always try to pick a guy, especially our big guys, and say, do you know anything about him? And of course they can Google it and look it up. But at first they truly didn't know like who the guy was. DeAndre Ayton was with me, and he's trying to be the number one pick in the draft. And he's like this amazing 7-foot, person. He just looks like if you developed a basketball player in a lab, you're like, that's how he'll look like. And Bill Walton would walk out at shoot around, and they would be standing together for 5 or 10 minutes, and he would be talking to DeAndre, and I would be watching and just trying to keep that image in my mind of who they both are. One as a freshman in college and one who's the top 50 all-time greatest players in our game, in his 50s or early 60s, just kind of looking at it through that lens. But I would always tell DeAndre, like, look, just so you know, like, listen to what he says. I mean, he's very wise. He was an amazing passer, you know. And DeAndre said, really? You know, is that right? But, you know, ironically, DeAndre's playing for the Portland Trail Blazers right now, right?
Yeah. All right, Coach. One more question for you, and I can't let you get out of here without asking you this question, and it's a shame I haven't asked you this question already. About a month ago, I would say, was the day that Ryan Conwell committed to Xavier. You tweeted a picture of a turkey.
A big turkey, a majestic turkey.
A massive turkey.
Yep.
I don't think we have gotten more questions about anything in the last year than the context of that turkey. Was it as simple as you seeing that turkey and tweeting it out? Can you give us anything on this turkey?
I saw the turkey earlier that day, and I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. Because I never have seen a turkey with the feathers up in the back. Does that turkey have the ability to bring the feathers down?
I think so.
I don't know. I should know. I don't.
I mean, you have to admit it was big.
It was a massive turkey.
And all I could think about is we have a dog. His name is Remy. He's a year old. He's a little guy. He's probably about 18 pounds. And I was wondering if Remy ran up against that particular turkey, what would happen?
Yeah.
And I didn't get a good feeling. It was massive. So, no, I was just completely in awe of, I can't believe I saw this turkey that was in my backyard, that close to my house, potentially in a fight with my dog, and I just happened to go. So had nothing to do with any goings on at Xavier. But I also noticed, and people have brought it to my attention, like they think it's this cryptic, tweet. It wasn't.
Well,
it was just a turkey.
Maybe the best thing about it now is that you actually have other people on the internet who are now taking pictures of turkeys and sending them to you. And
when I lived in Arizona, I would always be in awe of the different creatures that the desert brought out. And I will name some creatures that I know in your lifetime, both of you, you've never seen.
I probably don't want to.
A Gila monster.
No.
Oh.
A pack rat.
No.
Pack rats can eat the wires of your car.
Hell no.
A javelina.
Sounds
you know
like
what a javelina is?
A wine?
It's a pack. So think about it. I said javelina. I said pack rat. And I said Gila monster.
Yeah.
Now, bobcat, mountain lion, you'll know, but like I've seen a mountain lion, a bobcat. I've seen hundreds of rattlesnakes, one which is literally, from me to you away, right outside of my front door. There's the biggest snake I've ever seen in my life, coyotes, et cetera. So, you move back to good old Ohio, kind of back home. Part of it is like, man, that's one thing. I don't have to worry about scorpions and, different things. And I'm in my backyard looking out there and I'm like, what in the world is that thing? And there you go. So that was the only reason that I tweeted it.
No, I think the world is a better place because you did.
It's got its own Twitter account now.
Yeah, there is. There is a
Gila monster. Look it up.
I will.
It'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
They're huge.
Oh, you're aware?
They aren't huge.
Am I thinking of it? Oh, I know what I'm thinking of. I'm not
You're
thinking of
I'm thinking of
I'm thinking of a Komodo dragon. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
All right.
That's good stuff.
Great way to end the show, Coach.
Gila monster.
Great way to end the show. Homework for next time. Great to be back with you guys. Great to be here. Yeah. I know there's no doubt in my mind, Adam, that you guys are going to schedule every show for the rest of the summer, the last week of June when I'm on my honeymoon. There's no doubt. You're going to schedule like 6 shows.
Where are you going on your honeymoon again?
Antigua. It's like all the way down south in the Caribbean. Yeah.
Nice.
You might run into a Gila monster.
Who knows?
I don't know. If there may be indigenous to the desert, probably.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
The desert's like its own thing.
Yeah.
So, there's no translation between if you're not in the desert, you're a creature in the desert, you can't exist anywhere else. Like, trust me on that. That's one thing that I know.
Well, it's great to be back here. It's should be a fun summer, and everything gets started today. For the next 8 weeks or so, we got some breaks in there too, built in with the schedule. But for the next 8 weeks or so, these guys around, everybody's reported to campus. So It's great to be here, and it's great to be around as another season kind of kicks off. But thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of the Sean Miller Podcast. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Deer Park Roofing, the official payroll sponsor of the Sean Miller Podcast, Payroll Partners, and our friends at TGE Solar. Signing off from the Sean Miller Podcast.
This has been the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing, with your hosts, Paul Fritschner and Adam Baum. Join us again soon for another episode with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.
Stop renting your power, own it. TGE Solar makes it easy to purchase solar panels for your home or business so you can take control of your monthly electricity bill and start saving today. They'll help you find the best solar system to meet your needs, and their expert in-house installation team makes the process seamless. They're proud to be based in Cincinnati, family owned and operated by a Xavier alum. Mention this podcast and save $1,000. Visit TGEsolar.com to request your free energy evaluation today. The Sean Miller Podcast is proud to partner with Payroll Partners, where you're not just a number. That means providing a best-in-class HR and payroll experience that was built on award-winning technology and live support customer service with a dedicated payroll specialist who's just a phone call away. You shouldn't have to choose between technology and customer service. At Payroll Partners, you get both. Payroll Partners is locally owned and operated by a proud Xavier alum. Visit payrollpartners.net. That's payrollpartners.net.